Hey everyone, Kevin here with JCR Off-Road, and in this video I'm going to show you how to install our new Overland Bed Rack designed to work with a soft topper. Now we do want to point out with this, we tried to make it really modular. So on the doors specifically, you can install these in multiple different configurations. We're going to show you how to install one just like this as an upfold, another one on the other side as a downfold door. So if you want to run both folding up, both folding down, whatever you need to do there to best suit your needs and your gear, that's totally up to you and how you configure the parts when you assemble your rack. So to get started, we're going to be assembling the main frame structure of the rack before setting it up on top of the vehicle to finish assembly as well as install the soft topper. To do that, we're going to start with the sides. You can kind of see I've got one here already assembled with our crossbar in the top location so that we can fit our door underneath. So I'm going to jump over to the other side and assemble that basically the opposite with the crossbar in the bottom. Now you're going to receive 4 of these crossbars with your rack. These are all the same, so it doesn't matter which one you grab. I'm going to start here with the front mount and place this right here against the bottom slot, and then reaching in from behind I can install 2 of these 5/16 button head bolts and get those started by hand into the serrated flange nuts. Now the vast majority of this rack is going to be assembled using these same 5/16 bolts and nuts. So the only tool you're going to need to get started is a 3/16 Allen socket. Then here, installing the back mount with the tapered portion of the leg toward the rear. That's going to assemble the same way. Simply get the crossbar up here and install 2 more 5/16 button head bolts. Now at this point I will say you are just going to want to leave all this stuff just finger tight at the moment so things can kind of move and shift as they need to, at least until we get it set up on the truck where it gets clamped in place. Once you have your sides loosely assembled to the crossbars, you're going to take your top rails and install those to the top of these uprights. So it's going to install just like this, with the more aggressive pointed end toward the front of the vehicle and this end toward the rear. And then it's just a matter of lining up the holes and installing more 5/16 button heads. Now you can probably see me putting in 2 bolts out here on the side. There's going to be 3 that go down from the top as well. Then you can come over and do the same thing over here on the other side. After you have those on, you can go ahead, starting on either side, and stand this up, and then grab your side-to-side top rails, get this lined up, and then begin installing the 3 bolts on each end. Then we can jump over to this side, stand that other side up, and get these bolts started. Now for this part, this is really going to pertain to your specific gear and what you intend to run. In our case, we're typically going to be mounting a rooftop tent up here on top of our rack, and I kind of already know the width, so I'm going to be installing these in our 3rd slot in, again using 5/16 button head hardware. Then once you have your main rack frame loosely assembled like you see here, grab the help of 1 or 2 of your friends and you can set it up on the bed. Now after you've got this rack set up on the bed of the truck, you're just going to need to center it front to rear. So that's pretty simple. It's kind of just an eyeball deal because it doesn't have to be incredibly precise. You've got a flat surface here on the bed rail, and then at each end it kind of kicks out. There's only so much space there, so when you center it, you're going to wind up with about a 1/2 inch of flat in front of and behind your mounts. Then once you have that position front to rear, you're going to need to clamp it to the bed. Now to do that, if your vehicle is equipped with the factory trail rail, you can grab the provided stainless carriage bolt strip, as well as 2 of the carriage bolts from your bolt pack, install them into the holes like so, and then that will slide in to the trail rail all the way down to where it lines up with this mounting face, and then it's just a matter of installing the provided flange nylock nuts. Now if yours is like ours and you're not working with the trail rail, you're going to be provided with a black clamp bracket like this. Basically going to be doing the same thing. Get the carriage bolts from the bolt pack, install them through the back side of that, and then you can simply hold the carriage bolts in, slide it up behind this mount so that the bolts protrude through the slots, and then you're going to want to slide this up high enough that the top edge clamps this bed rail, and then again just install these nylock flange nuts and you can tighten everything down. Now up here in the front, your soft topper hold down clamp is going to mount just directly behind the bed rack mount right here. All right, so one more thing we want to touch on here before we get the soft topper installed underneath the rack. Now, if you're someone already running one of these soft toppers, you already kind of know they're not 100% weather tight as it is, but introducing our mounts in here underneath the hold down rails is just kind of adding another potential place for moisture, dust, or dirt to get in underneath those side rails. So to get the best seal here, you can pick up some weather stripping type foam, most likely from any auto parts store or home goods store, and lay that down along these rails before clamping the soft topper down. Then once you're happy with all that, grab the help of a friend to slide your fully assembled soft topper in through this back opening, just using caution not to drag it aggressively down the sides of the rack on the way in. Now here in the back, to tighten down your soft topper, you're going to remove the 2 nuts for the upright clamp, and then take the provided 90 bracket with the slotted portion to the side and this single center hole on this flange up. Simply slide that over those 2 carriage bolts and then reinstall the nuts. Now we're not going to tighten this in place yet, however we are going to tighten it up enough that it holds the rear clamshell clamp and just leaves this loose enough that you can tap it around with a little bit of force to adjust the height. Okay, and then to determine the height of that, you're going to take the top portion of the clamp with this smaller bent flange in to the slot, and then position it so that these 2 small 90 flanges meet together. And what you want here is, with these 2 faces parallel to one another, you want to see about an 1/8 of an inch gap here before tightening this down. So I'm going to need to slide mine down just a little bit. I'll get that 1/8 inch gap, and then I'll tighten this to the side bracket. Then once you're happy with the height of that, you've got the gap you're looking for here, grab your 5/16 button head bolt and then a non-flange nylock nut with a washer. Go ahead and get that started, and then it's just a matter of lining this up so that everything looks neat. It's relatively square all the way around here, and tightening that up to clamp down your soft topper. So after you have your rack and your soft topper clamped down in place, you're going to need to come back outside and install the corner gussets. Now here on the back, they're going to look just like this. They're going to be the brackets with the larger step here, and then these ones simply slide in behind the rear flange of this crossbar and this face here on the upright, and then those simply bolt in with those same 5/16 button heads and flange nuts. Now when you are installing the hardware on this, you can obviously see I ran these from back to front, but the 2 that run down here are going to need to come in from front to rear so that you have room to get in there and tighten those, because you don't have a whole lot of space between this rear flange of the upright and this bracket with the bolts in place. All right, and then here on the front of the rack, these corner gussets are going to look very similar, a little bit smaller offset right here, and they just mount right to the front of the rack, again with 5/16 hardware. Then after you get all 4 of these corner gussets in, the outside main frame of your rack is fully assembled. You can go ahead and tighten up all those 5/16 button heads. After all that's tight, we can begin installing the doors. Now, for the one on this side, it's going to be a flip up door, so we'll walk you through that first. To begin, you're going to install the door mounting brackets up in these top corners. You're going to want to install this just like that, so that the shorter leg of the bracket sticks out. And then it's simply going to install to begin with right here at the bottom of this slot. Now for this, I'm just installing it with more 5/16 button head hardware. The next bracket you're going to need to install is these lower latch brackets. They look just like this. They're going to install with this small step edge going in so that it sits inside of the door. And then they're going to mount right here in this bottom slot. Now the door strut is going to mount through this top hole, so we're just going to be putting 1 bolt in the bottom right now and lightly snugging that up. And to position this up and down, you're just going to put the top edge of this kind of flush with the top of that slot for the time being, and just like the top bracket, it'll probably need to be adjusted once the whole door is in place. Then lastly, before we throw the door up in place, go ahead and grab your struts, as it helps to have these already in, so you have something that you can kind of quick just prop the door up once you have it loosely bolted in place. For that, you're just going to take the stud end of this, slide it through that top hole, and then back it up with the provided nut and washer. And now, since this pivots on a ball mount here, you can tighten that up at this time. Then just grab the help of a friend to lift the door up in place and get the bolts started in these top mounts. Those are just going to be the longer 5/16 button head hardware and nylock nuts. Now once you do have the door up in place and potentially a buddy holding up the other side for you, you can pivot your struts in here to the mounts. Now if you had these tucked in here and put the door up in place and you can't get them back out because these are fairly hard to press down, they do simply unthread down here at this mount by turning counterclockwise, and then you can pivot it out where you need it and thread that back in, so it's not a big deal. You don't have to take it all the way off down here. And then you can bolt the strut to the door up here using another long 5/16 button head, making sure to use a nylon washer in between, and then tighten that up with another nylock nut. Now when you tighten both of these up here, you're going to want to tighten them down so that they're snug and they're not going to rattle, but these do need to pivot, and that's why we went with the nylock fasteners up here, so that you can leave them just loose enough that they'll pivot, not rattle, and they can still move over time up and down with the door. Now when you are bolting this lift strut to the door, on this end, you are going to want to use 2 of the nylon washers between the door and the strut, just to provide enough clearance so that it doesn't contact between the 2 down here with it closed. Then after we have these tightened up, we can begin making final adjustments to this door. So as we went to close ours, you can kind of see that it doesn't close all the way. And what we're going to need to do here, like we mentioned before, is just make some minor adjustments to this bracket. So we're going to move it down just enough that this strut is able to fully collapse and the door can seat against the bracket down here. And then we'll show you how to get the latches installed and check final adjustment to those as well. So after we've got our door to close and we're happy with the adjustment there, you can take the provided latches, remove the 2 Phillips head screws from the back. That'll allow you to pull off this clamshell portion, and then you can slide this down into the indexed hole in our door, back it back up with that clamshell, and then simply reinstall the Phillips head screws here on the back side. Now after you get both of these latches installed, you make any minor adjustments that you may need to your latches and your mounting brackets. You can go ahead and tighten up all this hardware if you haven't already, and that'll complete the install for the flip up door. So over here on the passenger side, we went and installed ours with the flip down door. Now the installation of this is going to be very similar to the other side, just as you might guess, upside down. So the mounting brackets go down here on the bottom, the latch brackets go up top. We kind of mounted our door where it's basically centered between this opening and the top of the bed. So to do that, we put these in the bottom of the highest visible slot. These have about a 1/2 inch of a slot visible here between the top of the mounting bracket and the top of the slot. And then it's just a matter of the fine adjustments. So to figure all that stuff out, what you need to do is install the lanyards instead of the struts like you had on the other side. That's pretty simple, and I'll show you how one of those go over here. So for these, we're just going to be mounting them with the provided number 10 button heads. We also gave you nylon washers for these to go in between the metal and powder coated surfaces. So you can start by the one hole up here on this upright that you can mount that to. Get that bolt in, get the nut and washer on the back side. Then down here on the door, we gave you several holes to mount this to, and that's just so you have some adjustment depending on where you decide to mount yours. Now with ours in this roughly centered position, I'm going with the second hole in from this edge. I'm just going to put my number 10 button head through from the outside. Nylon washer, then the cable, another nylon washer, and the nut. After that, it's just a matter of tightening these up with an 1/8 inch hex and a 3/8 wrench. Now, kind of just like our hinges, you're just going to tighten these up to where they're kind of snug, but still have room to pivot. After that, it's just a matter of making minor adjustments. So if you need to adjust these brackets down here to get that to sit flat or slightly angled in if you want, that's something you can do, and then you can double check that your latches click in up here and adjust those brackets at all if necessary. And that'll complete your rack install. Now you got all kinds of space to mount your gear. Now if you have any questions about this rack, this install, or any other product here at JCR Off-Road, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can email us, info@jcroffroad.com, or give us a phone call, 269-353-1184.